What's going on, everybody? Welcome to LUMIX Live this week. We've got I think a much more chill stream for today. I figured, it's November. It's the first stream that we've got. It's going to be a relatively short month with Thanksgiving happening here in the United States. So, just wanted to kind of take it down a little bit, open up the floor, kind of like what we always do. So that y'all can be asking us questions, we can demonstrate stuff. I have a couple things that I want to demonstrate, because since the last two streams, with the release of LUMIX Flow, I've had a lot of people asking, like, hey, can you walk through, like, actually getting the cameras connected and what steps are involved with it? So I kind of want to go through some of that stuff for everybody. I've done it a couple of times, but this way, hey, it never hurts. There's always new people that jump in and tune into these broadcasts, and why not? But yeah, throughout the stream, if you have questions and stuff that you want to talk about, drop it in the chat. Make sure to tag at LUMIX USA. This way I can just see it on my side. We'll try to go through, as much as we can. I've got, my S1 Mark IIe hooked up here so we can look through the camera. I've got an overhead with LUMIX Lab open because I've had a couple questions about LUMIX Lab. And we'll just kind of go through it. So before we jump into that, remind you in the United States about LUMIX Pro service. We have the Red and Platinum tier available in the US. The Red tier, which you can check out at the QR code on the screen, gives you adds a 3-year extended manufacturer warranty on top of your purchase, as long as you purchased it new and your camera qualifies for LUMIX Pro service. You also get yourself into the program, so should you ever have any need to use the service team, you've got a platform ready to go right there for it. But if you're someone who needs, or wants higher level service and support, you'd always take a look at the Platinum tier. That gets you that 3-year extended warranty. It gets you 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways. You get access to our membership hotline, so if you'd rather speak to somebody instead of going through email or chat, you have that option as well. And then you also get a lot of the stuff for like annual sensor cleanings, lens calibration, firmware updates, like all the kind of maintenance stuff that maybe you don't want to do on your own. You'd rather have someone do it for you. So I encourage you to take a look at those platforms. Again, the QR code's right below for the US market. Pretty good stuff. Let's take a look at some of the questions. We'll get this one out of the way right away. I'm gonna shorten your username to Nick. It says, what do you think about the new R6 III from Canon? Look, in this industry, it is always cool to see new products coming out. It's within the photographic and the video market, it is a great thing that, we're constantly producing newer and better products out there. I think that's just good for all of us across the board. Competition's great. I still stand by the fact that I don't think many of the cameras hold a candle to, in general, what we can offer you and what we provide you, especially for the dollar value. So it's cool. The industry's in the news, which brings more eyes to this industry as a whole, brings new people in that may have not considered picking up cameras before. And we've got everything from the S9, the Micro Four Thirds cameras, G9 Mark II, GH7, all the way up. So we've got stuff that offers across the board, and good stuff in the industry. I have a LUMIX S9. For me, it's almost perfect camera. The only thing missing for video is the gyro data file. So Walker, says, for me, yes. The Panasonic IBIS sorts of corners a lot, which is a big turnoff for me. So I would ask, as far as the gyro data works, because I've seen some results of what people use for gyro data, that it actually can cause some other problems, like weird ghosting effects and stuff like that. Um, gyro data is a very interesting thing. It's still a very niche tool within cameras, especially with a stabilization unit. It adds a ton of time to your post-processing if you don't have the proper hardware to accelerate the process in post. And as far as things like if you're noticing stuff in the corners or anything like that, and you're shooting, kind of ultra wide. So I'm just pulling up my S9 here so I can make sure I give you the correct information. One of the things I can recommend is, and let me make sure I get the right setup for it. One of the things I'd recommend is, looking at like the E-stabilization mode on the camera. Maybe try setting it to standard, which is going to give you a little bit of a crop in for those ultra wide lenses. And maybe that helps in that particular situation. But yeah, the gyro stuff is interesting. I don't think we've got plans for it in our camera. Because our in-body stabilization is still miles ahead of what everybody else is doing in practical real-world use. But I will always pass that information on, that, people have been asking about it. So, let's see here. Speaking of open gate, 60 frames per second, how about the GH7? Did the engineers have an answer for that question? So I haven't 100% heard back from the engineers on GH7 yet. However, the one thing I will say is the GH7 with the fact that it's always operating and recording in the highest resolution possible to downsample, open gate and 60 frames per second is just not possible within that sensor, or within that setup on the camera. So, if you need, you also gotta remember it came out, many years before, like the S1II came out, where we were able to do things like high frame rate, open gate, and even on the S1II, we got to go down to 5.1K to be able to do it. So we have to downsample for that, and there's numbers of reasons for it. It's either if the sensor's capable to do it from a hardware perspective, that's great, but the processor's got to be able to do it. The bandwidth has to be able to manage the amount of data and the amount of heat that's generated. And when you go up higher in resolution, especially higher in frame rate, you do generate a lot more heat. One of the things that I think often gets kind of misinterpreted in the industry, and we'll keep this to, let's say, open gate specifically. Like, one, with our cameras like the S1 Mark II, we're processing nearly exponentially more information than competitive cameras are. Many other cameras are either downsampling or they have to offer you a bind mode to be able to get around a thermal problem. Our cameras are always pushing to get the highest image quality that you can get. That means that we are processing a lot more information than the rest. That's why in every empirical test that I've seen, we have better dynamic range. Our latitude is typically better than the competitors. And the trade-off in some cases might be a few milliseconds in readout speed, because we choose to work with a much better product to give you a better product in the end. When you go to things like the GH7, that system was designed around, one, there were no open gate 60p cameras in the market at all. I couldn't tell you 100% if that's a sensor hardware isn't capable, or if it's out of the processing envelope for things like thermals and the image quality. But unfortunately, sometimes things are just what they are. It doesn't always mean that stuff will stay that way, but I think it's a safe bet that, GH7, as far as open gate 60, is probably not something that's going to happen, because if we were able to do it, we would have done it. Especially on a camera like the GH7. I mean, it's the first of our series that added RAW internally. So if we were able to do it and make it work and have it as a reliable, recording option, it's a very, very high likelihood it would have been in there. Or if it was something that would need more time to develop or to work on, we would have said something about that. So, you know, if you need open gate, you need 3:2 or 4:3 aspect ratio, and you need it in high frame rate for some slow motion effect, it is the S1 Mark II. And the fact of the matter is, the S1 Mark II is the only affordable camera in the industry that does that as of today. So no one else can actually argue that. That's an empirical data point right now. So, where's the other question that just came in there? I do have a question for you, and it's about low and high base ISO circuits. Can you break down the low and high base ISO on LUMIX camera and its reasoning and how it manages dynamic range and highlights and shadows? I can give a rough breakdown on this, Art. So, for those that don't know, certain sensors out there, and it changes depending on the camera and generation, stuff like that, but this is the general idea. You have your pixel, you have your converter to take the light photons and then convert them into something that turns into an image, right? That setup, depending on how the sensor is designed, will either have a single ADC, so analog to digital converter, or you may have multiples. There are some cameras that do it all on the backside, where it's just one signal in and then it's just different processing. But at its base level, like let's use the S1 Mark II as an example. So you have two native ISO ranges. That means that you have two circuits on the back of the sensor. One circuit is tuned for a lower ISO value or lower gain level. The other is for a higher gain level. And you can see this for yourself if you look at the noise patterns as you raise your ISO. So if we look at, actually I'm going to use the S1II because I have that hooked up. So I can go here. So, you know, if we look at the S1 Mark II here, and resolution and frame rates aren't going to matter in this case. What's going to matter is your color profile. So let's start in standard. So in standard, which is a photo-oriented color profile, this means that it is designed to be, you know, pretty much as you shoot it is how you get it, if you're going to be using it for video. You don't really have a ton of latitude with it. What you'll see is, so on our cameras, we give you the choice. You have the ability to go low, high, or auto. But if I go into low, you'll notice that if I go into my ISO, I have the option of 100 all the way up to 800. Now, an easy way to remember what the native ISOs are for our circuitry as of now is if you go into low, whatever the lowest number you can go before you see like EX next to the number, that's your native or base ISO for that particular range and color profile. And they change based on profiles. If I go to high, let me change this into high, and I go in, you'll see the lowest is 640. Now there's a third of a stop overlap within these two, whether you're low or high in a standard profile. It's fairly common. You've got the ability that 640, you can hit 640 on the low circuit, but that's going to stay in the low circuit. If you know you want the next bump in image quality, you have to go to the high circuit. Now, if I change this to auto, you'll see that it's just one continuous range, 100 all the way up to whatever the maximum is on the particular camera. In this case, 51,200. The camera in this mode is going to automatically change the value when it goes through. And the way you can see this is if you record just a black screen, right? So if I just record that, and I'm recording this clip, as I bring my ISO up, you'll see at 100, it's a pretty clean. I don't know if YouTube's algorithm is going to show this well. You see that it's clean. I start bringing it up. There's a little bit more noise getting added in. I hit 640, 800, and you'll see that in that range, it drops back down. Where you see this more visually is, let's change this into Vlog. So if I go to Vlog and let's turn my monitoring LUT off, And let's go in here. So if I go into my ISOs, and I'm set in high ISO on this, so let's go auto. You'll see, okay, we'll go 640, relatively clean. We start bringing it up. You see more and more noise being added into the image there, and then I hit 4,000, and you see that it drops and it's cleaner. So 3,200, 4,000. Easiest way to look is like in the corners, that kind of thing. This is not a scientific way to show you. What is happening here is at that change point, at that change point, the circuit is being flipped, and it's using the other circuit for that. So to make sure I'm addressing your question, break down low and high ISOs and LUMIX cameras is reasoning. So the reason this does this is because if you didn't have a dual native ISO or multiple different circuits for it, your noise will collectively get worse over whatever your native range is. In Vlog, in this case, it'd be 640. So you see that noise grow to 3,200. If I didn't have a dual circuit and I hit 4,000, you just see more noise. And then I go to 6,400, 12,800, so on and so forth. It just exponentially gets more and more. The secondary circuit allows you to reset the gain. So that means that while they won't be 100% perfect, you will see a little more noise in 4,000 than 640. You'll still see relatively the same dynamic range, just with a slightly higher noise level. But that means that every ISO after that is only being gained up from 4,000 instead of having to be gained up from, in this case, 640. So it's a smaller step to go up. That gives you just in general much cleaner performance. It gets you extends the amount of dynamic range you have a little bit higher than a traditional circuit would. And then in cases like the S1 Mark II, where you've got a totally different system in there, that dual circuitry system allows us to also do the DR boost functionality, which is what allows us to take both of those circuits. So we take the image, the photons come in, hit the sensor, they're parallel processed between the two gain circuits simultaneously, and then they're in the processor side recombined. What that does is that allows us to take, the saturation from a low ISO, which is going to get you more highlight retention. And then it lets us take the cleanliness of the shadows in the higher ISO, because now we've cleaned up the signal. But to do that, you reduce typically a little bit of your highlight dynamic range. That lets us combine those into a single image and nets about an extra stop of dynamic range. And you typically see this gain in the highlights when you use stuff like that. So you're going to get, you can test this with the false color on the S1 Mark II. When you turn false color on and you're in non-dynamic range boost, you can look at something that's fully marked out as red in false color, and then when you turn it on, it now drops out of red. It's because your gains are primarily in the highlights. Now your shadows are cleaner, so you're going to get a cleaner shadow. And in the photography side, that's one of the benefits that you see with the fact that we use DR boost when you're using, select stills modes within the camera, is that if you wanted to see this in practical use, you would see this if you drag your shadows up out of the basement. If I really crank my shadows up without the DR, like with a sensor that's not doing DR boost, that's typically where you end up seeing things like color shifts, or you get a lot of color noise, things like that in the shadow region. Where on the S1 Mark II, if you pull those shadows up the exact same way, you actually see that there's practically no color shift in it, and you have way less noise in the shadows. There's an article on Petapixel that talks about it and how that stuff works together. But that's what, basically how that kind of system works, Art. It's designed to give you a lot more flexibility. If you do, compare it to much older sensors, you also have to add in the fact that, you can't necessarily compare the performance of a modern sensor like what's in the S1 Mark II with a partially stacked sensor to necessarily even like the sensor in the S5 Mark II. Because one of the things that, kind of happens is, say you're happy with the noise performance that you get at, say, 4000 on an S5 Mark II. Great. We know that sensor, it's not the fastest readout sensor in the world. It has to crop to Super 35 for 4K 60. And those are the things that for the longest time, that's just where the industry was. Then you enter the S1 Mark II that has a much more advanced sensor in it, that has similar noise performance, as far as noise goes, not necessarily dynamic range. Similar noise performance when you're not using DR boost, but it has a lot more electronics in the way that, if all things were equal, would reduce the image quality. You would see an increase in noise. Once you add things like DR boost, which is what allows us to get, in some cases, faster performance, if we're talking stills, I get no real difference in performance for stills, but I get a much better working image out of it. If I'm in video, I get more dynamic range than the S5 II does. But even if I'm not using it, I still get a comparable performance level, even though it's using a much newer technology base. So sensors, even if they all say like 24 or 33 or 60 or 45 or 47, whatever number you want to throw out there, that's only one piece of it. How the actual workings of how they handle ISO, what their circuitry is designed off of, all of those things kind of change the kind of equation. So it's not always a direct comparison. If you compare similar sensor architectures, it's a much easier thing to see where, again, I will point to empirical data that the S1 Mark II just dominates as far as dynamic range goes. I think with DR boost, I think we're one of the highest, if not the highest, within the mirrorless category, outside of going into cinema cameras. So, yeah. Hopefully that helps your answer your question, Arts. Like I said, it's got to be relatively vague because there's a lot of detail we could go down. Could anamorphic desqueeze be baked into the files by the camera so it doesn't have to be done in post? Some editors don't understand desqueeze. That's been a conversation that Matt Fraser and I have had for quite a while, is wanting to see like where can we take our dominance in anamorphic to the next level. For one, we have we have the most well-sorted set of tools, functions, flexibility, compatibility for anamorphic use case that, honestly, sure, a couple other companies have added OpenGate, but they still don't hold a candle to what we can do between the fact that we've been doing it for the better part of a decade, adding some form of an OpenGate recording. So it's, hey, cool, everyone caught up to things we did 10 years ago. Being able to desqueeze is something that Matt and I have been pushing kind of hard. I guess the question I would pose everybody here is, so desqueezing content, right? I'm going to do this as a poll. It's been a while since I've done one of these, so let me see here. Start a poll. Desqueeze preview for photo and video. All right, so I'm dropping a poll in here. So I'm limited on the characters I can do with it. So I want to ask all of you this question: do you see value? Do you value the ability to desqueeze your footage on camera? And by this I mean preview desqueeze, not desqueeze the content itself. Do you value that for photo and video? And yeah, see if that's something y'all see a value for. All right, cool. Let's minimize that and let's go back to the questions. But yeah, that's some of the stuff that like I said, Matt and I have been asking about. I would love to see it. I'd love to see us expand a lot more with anamorphic. We're still leading it, so let's just keep leading that side of the industry. I love that commercial you did. Uniquely shares your value versus the competition. Yeah, that was a real fun project to work on. There may be more coming. So if you haven't, we are running an ad right now that I encourage you to go take a look at if you see it. Yeah. If you do see it, let us know. It's always fun. Let's see here. Ever notice when recording on S9 switching from E stabilization to boost the boost doesn't activate and acts as it's disabled? I have not seen that. I can take a look and see. David Rose, if you can let me know what firmware you're on your S9, I can try to take a look. If I record video in log with Rec. 709 real-time LUT, will I be taking advantage of 14 stops of dynamic range to avoid over or under exposure when the lights change compared to standard or natural recording? It depends on what your LUT is designed for. If you create a LUT that is mapping the 14 stops of dynamic range to your 709 project so that you're redistributing your tones back through, your mid-tone, your shadows, and your highlights, you will see an appreciable difference between using something like standard or natural. Standard is, again, remember, standard is a very specific stills-oriented profile. It's designed for photographic. It does have a more of a tendency to kind of crush the shadows, gives you a much higher contrast. For a lot of video users, that's not what you want to work with, because you have to remember that if you've crushed your shadows in the capture, they're gone. Where if you shoot with log, yeah, you can remap them, you can shift them around. The distribution of the bits are better. So shooting vlog with a Rec. 709 LUT on top of it, as long as that LUT is designed with the dynamic range that the camera has in mind, yeah, it's going to give you a better result. Is it going to be better than shooting natural? Depends on the job or the use case that you're working with or the look you're trying to go for. But in general, yeah, it will be better. You can also typically get things like, there's other things to keep in mind with things like standard, natural, and vivid in the other profiles, and that's things like built-in noise reduction or sharpening, that a lot of times as video users, I know you don't want embedded. You want to be able to have the control over those things. So I think an easy way to describe it would be is that if I shot in, say, like 709 is not a good example of this, but if I shot in, say, flat, and I added enough contrast back to get it to look like 709, you're going to see more of a probably crunchier image from standard, natural, or like any of those profiles versus the actual like 709, the Cine-like profiles, or Vlog or Arilog C3. Because you have more flexibility, and there's other things like Vlog and Arilog, they reduce the amount of noise reduction used, sharpening, all that kind of stuff. You have control over those things as well. Will we receive Arilog C3 on the S1II? No. As far as I know, no. That's an S1 Mark II series and above, or GH7. So don't expect it. On the other side, Lumix, do you ever receive the email mockup I sent you? Yes, I did receive that art. Matt and I have to double check and connect with Matt. I do have a conversation with the team that develops Flow. I'll pass that over to them as well. How does diffraction compensation work? When does it kick in? Does it work with manual lenses? Diffraction compensation in our cameras only works with, I believe, and I will have to double check this, but obviously 100% it works with our lenses, because we know everything about our lenses. We know optically how they perform, how they were designed, how they function across the entire board, because we built them. I believe it does work with the other manufacturers as well, although I can't attest to how accurate it is versus our lenses. I've honestly never dug into it that way. I kind of just always turn it on. But what diffraction compensation does is, well, if you stop a lens down, you typically start getting diffraction, which is a softening of the image. Diffraction compensation is basically, in a very simplified way of describing it, it's like a very intelligent sharpening that tries to correct the edges of softened images because of diffraction. I don't know exactly when it kicks in, like what the parameters are for it to be, activated. But in general, I mean, honestly, with good lenses, I get there's the arguments about, well, you never want to shoot with a lens into diffraction. I hate to break it to many people, but, some of the most famous photographs in the world, things like diffraction are the furthest things from anyone's mind. You look at things like, Sports Illustrated covers of, like, sidelines photography. I am willing to bet there are many images that if you looked at the settings, you'd be like, and you were someone that cared that much about, the technical side of it, you'd probably be looking at it going like, why the hell did you choose that for your settings? Because you have to get the image. But yeah, it is a mode that's in there. We've had it for years, and I'm 99% sure it does not work with manual focus lenses because we have no way to tell what aperture the lens is at. Can we set minimum maximum ISO values for auto ISO? You can. So if you want to set minimum ISO values, you go to ISO sensitivity. So I can go in here and say, okay, I want 640 as my low range, and I only want to go up to 25,600. And then if I go in, change this to auto, you get it there. The other thing is, and this is something that's not done out of the box, and I will never understand why, you'll see in the top corner up here, I have an option called ISO limit. If you want to do that or add that to your camera, you're going to go into your menu. You're going to go to the setup icon. At least I think it's a setup icon. I set this up once when I get the camera and then never touch it again. Yeah, so you're going to go to the setup icon. You're going to go to the operations page 1. And then you're going to go to ISO display settings and change this from ISO to limit/ISO. Now what this means is if I hit ISO and I'm in auto, my front dial now controls what my high range is. So this means that it won't let me, all right, I don't want it to go over 3200 ISO. There you go. And we're good to go with that. So yeah, you can set your ISOs. If I go back in here and I go to ISO sensitivity and I change this to say 3200 and change my upper limit to 12,800. Now if I go into auto ISO, you'll see that it won't go down to 640. So little more complicated to set what your low range is, but usually you're not going to set your low limit at that particular point. Usually you're more focused on what your high limit is for it. Let's see here. Given that the S9 was designed with social content in mind, is there an opportunity to bring live streaming to this camera? My understanding is no, it doesn't have the hardware for it. And with social content, it was the content creation side of it, not necessarily like the live stream creation side of it. I know that's a bit of a, it's kind of semantics for some, but yeah, it wasn't designed for live streaming. Live streaming does generate a decent amount more heat. Usually it runs more powerful because you also have to run the Wi-Fi module, usually faster with more power. And knowing that it's not a fully magnesium alloy chassis and the heat dissipation is different in that model, that's why it doesn't do live streaming. Is there any bug fixes coming for the latest update of the S5IIX? TTL overexposes at 0 or even -1, and the image preview after the photo burst always gives the warning there's no SD card. I have tested exactly what you're describing, and on none of my cameras do I have that situation. couple things I would ask is, have you fully reset your camera and tested to see there? After a firmware update, especially after you add like substantial amounts of features, it's usually a good idea to do a reset and then maybe reload your settings back on, because sometimes code gets more efficient, certain things change that impact that could conflict with a setting you had prior. But I've tested with, where is it? I have tested with this flash. This is the V862O, so this is the proper TTL flash for our cameras. And I don't have a negative or overexposing problem with TTL flash. And I've never gotten a warning that there's no SD card in the camera. So if the problem persists, I would recommend getting it checked by a service and support team for you. Hey Sean, thanks for another live chat. This is a real peak to being a LUMIX user. Can we get in camera focus stacking for the G9 Mark II? Last time you said it was a photocentric camera. I have asked. I have sent that notification and everything over to the engineering team to say, like, hey, now that we've got it in the S1II series, is it possible to go into the Micro Four Thirds? I haven't heard back yet. The only thing in my mind that comes up is that because they are different processors, they're different generations of the new engines, I can't guarantee that the G9 Mark II has the hardware needed to do it, but I've asked, and I'll keep asking for it, because I do like it as an addition in the cameras. Could you point me to where I could find the resource LUT to match logs with brands other than using on the same project? I would recommend you to take a look at Dunna Didit's recent video with the S1 Mark II, where he talks about Arilog C3 compared to Log C3. He does a really good kind of demonstration about, ways that you can color match in Resolve. So definitely go take a look at his video about it. I'm not the best at where those resources are. Some TTL and shutter delay issues with Godox flashes in the S1II and the G9 Mark II using latest Godox flash triggers. Please ask the engineers to investigate, especially with no LUMIX flashes. I'll ask him. I don't ever use TTL flash. I don't know if it's just because of how I was brought up in photography. We didn't use TTL. I use manual for everything, but I'll ask him to take a look at it. Can the tracking be improved, like how well the head or eye is tracked when multiple humans are set via the software from the GH7, S5II, S1 Mark II, or is it new hardware needed? I mean, we've proven over the years that we can always, tweak and adjust and make changes to things like autofocus. Not 100% sure if everything that you're describing. What would help foresight is, what improvement would you want to see? I've said this a couple of times. I know, it's easy for us to say, like, hey, can we make improvements? Well, if you can describe what you mean by, like, how well head or eye is tracked, that helps, kind of give a little bit more clarity. Because if you're saying, like, tracked as far as, like, recognizing, is the display too crowded? Is it a UI thing? Do you want, box overhead with crosshair? Do you want box over eye? All those things kind of get muddied together when we get the comments like, hey, can you make improvements? If you can give us a little bit more specific detail as to, like, what exactly you want to see improved, that can definitely help us, so that I can get you a better answer. Any chance we'll be seeing false color in cropless mode IS in the GH7? Probably not. Where did we go? Where did we go? 2000 ISO is base ISO. David Rose, on the S9, no, the S9, your native ISOs would be 640, 4000 in Vlog, so 640 and 4000. In standard photo modes, it's 100 or 640, and then there's different ones for cine-like profiles, and then the HLG profiles for video. Does Lumix work with Affinity Photo to support Lumix RAW file formats when new cameras come out? Affinity and those other companies, I believe, use the open source RAW formats, or they're based on whatever the OS level supports. I do not think they've ever reached out to us for direct manufacturer support for RAW. So, yeah. Any of the programs that use open source RAW formatting, it's kind of on those manufacturers to either be keeping up with it, or if the info's not there, to like contacting to add it. User feedback is a big point of it. The more users of a program tell the developers, like, hey, you don't have support for this, why don't you? It's in that company's interest to want to reach out. We're not going to proactively go out and reach out to every single company out there. There's too many of them out there, and there's other reasons why, whether or not, I don't want to throw commentary out. But a lot of companies that can do RAW support for various cameras, if you notice, they're usually lagging behind, like the main two, like Lightroom or Adobe and Capture One, for multiple different reasons. Some of these companies are only exist for a short amount of time, and then they're gone. So, strange problem. My GH7 internal LUTs got corrupted after the latest update. I had to completely reset the camera settings in order to fix the internal Vlog LUT. Any other people have this issue? I saw one person that said that they had that particular issue, and doing a reset fixed it. At least in my conversations and my discussions with engineering team, I haven't been able to replicate it either. So not 100% sure. But if resetting it fixed it, in general, I do always recommend that after you do a firmware update, save your camera settings, do a reset, load your camera settings back on. The reason for this is simple, is I've worked around enough technology that after a while, and actually, here's a really good example. If you are a Windows user and you've got graphics cards, if you just go in when NVIDIA or AMD says, hey, you've got a new graphics driver, and you install it, after a while, you're going to notice weird things happening with the performance of your graphics card. Every once in a while, you have to go back in, use programs that completely wipe out all of the drivers, and then reinstall them fresh, and then all those problems are gone. Anytime you're doing things where it's rolling changes to software, you can potentially run into problems like that, especially if you make really big jumps in firmware updates. It's possible that might be something tied to, something along those lines. But 9 out of 10 times a reset corrects stuff. If I have the Sirui AF lens, I'd love it for photo. That's actually what we stream on right now. Okay, that was to the D-Squeeze. Actually, sound off in the chat. How many of you actually use or want to use anamorphic lenses for photography? I'm going to actually change the poll. Let's end this poll. Let's start one more poll. Do you use anamorphic lenses for photography? All right, I just updated the poll again. This one's a little different question. It's do you use anamorphic lenses for photography? I would love to know what this number is, because a couple of us argue back and forth whether or not, like, do people actually use it, or is it still a very niche thing in the market? If you are using it, let me know in the comments if there are any challenges or problems you have with it. Like, what are your biggest frustrations with using anamorphic lenses in photography? David says, firmware is the one before the latest. Let me go back and double check your question. Oh, and just as a reminder, everybody, so I have to end the stream at 2 o'clock today, so in 15 minutes. But we are going to continue this conversation, this set of chat, over on Discord. So if you want to join us over on Discord, the link is down in the description. That's going to start at like 1:15 or 2:15 Central Time. So it'll start 15 minutes past the hour. We're just going to shift over to Discord and have a similar conversation. So if you want to do that, jump over to Discord after. Where was your other question here? S9, I have a Rode mic Pro and shotgun split with Rode cable. It seems as only the shotgun track is monitoring regardless of which cable I plug in. Only one track is showing. Pointers. So you have a Rode mic Pro and a shotgun going into a split cable with a split Rode cable into the camera. So you're trying to record like left and right channels with the Rode mic and then the shotgun. That could be a number of problems. Check and make sure they work individually. Make sure that if you use one mic, you're getting the two audio tracks. If you use the other mic, you're getting the two audio tracks. Because it could be your cabling. Could be that both are trying to send the audio on the same signal or on the same channel. I've not run into that one before. Where do we go? There we are. Is it possible to place anti-aliasing low-pass filter in front of a lens like ND filter instead of right before the sensor? My understanding is no. I would talk to Dan Hopkins and the folks over at Kalari Vision with their clip-in optical low-pass filter. Dan has a lot of good info. That's one of the things you could always talk about over on Discord as well. Thanks, Sean. Quick question. My S1, G9, and S5 Mark II constant preview used to automatically switch off when I put my Godox on. Is there a way to do that with the S1II? I thought that's how the S1II worked. I'll have to double check. I usually don't use constant preview at all. Well, that much anymore. I just read what the meter's telling me. But I'll check into that one for you. I shoot a good bit of macro and absolutely love the internal focus stacking in the S1R2. It was the main reason I switched back to LUMIX from the Z8. Awesome. Glad to have you back. Or glad to have you in the system. Thanks for doing the LUMIX Live. The LUMIX event in LA last month. I'd love to make it if there's another one. And thanks, Sean. I'll look at Donna's video. Yeah, definitely look at Donna's video. Yeah, the LUMIX Connect event was a lot of fun. Obviously it's the first one that we've done, so we're making sure that we have a lot of stuff ironed out logistically and stuff like that. We want to keep them a little bit smaller because we want you all to be able to actually, talk with us, have a conversation, and not feel rushed to be like, I only have so much time that I can talk to this person or anything like that. So we tried to keep it a little bit more of a tight-knit, smaller group. And eventually, the idea would be to roll them out, across the U.S. more often. And yeah, just kind of expand that whole idea. Let's see here. Am I crazy, or does the S1R2 have a very unique look compared to other LUMIX cameras? You're not crazy. The S1R2 sensor has a very, very, kind of different look to how it produces an image. I think if you go back and look at like what Cam and Kofi and some of the others have said about it, earlier on, I think Zach and Connor also talk about this. It is a very different sensor. Like, one, it's not a stacked sensor, so you're not, like, you are going to get better performance from an image quality perspective, just raw sensor out of it, because you don't have to use things like DR boost or some other modes to get there. But that sensor does also have the DR expansion mode, which gets you even more dynamic range out of it, more flexibility, and then now we've got Arilog C3 on them, so no, you're definitely not crazy. The S1R2 sensor is really, really special. A great feature would be able to develop tags for takes in camera so that you can say bad take, good take, or whatever. Import tags created as a cinematographer. In camera would be cool. Obviously, we do have that with LUMIX Flow, but it could definitely pass the idea on is it possible to tag? Because we can do, you can do star ratings for clips, but I don't think that bakes into like metadata or into video metadata, and it doesn't generate an XML file, so as far as video goes, it would only be like kind of a half measure for that. Any chance of getting a raw file and focus stacking the S1II series via a future update? No clue. Honestly, I'm not sure. I can ask though. Who at RE do we need to talk to in order to get their log C3 to work with external recorders? I mean, if you're shooting externally with RAW, it kind of doesn't matter. You just go into your editing and just interpret it as the workspace that you want to work in. Yeah. Is there a way to fully reset the camera without losing every map button? So depending on what camera you have, if it's a camera from like any of our PDAF cameras, you just do a go into your camera, go to the wrench icon, go to the gear icon, save, restore your settings. So you're going to save out your camera's current settings. Help if I push the button. Yeah, you're going to save out your camera settings. You'll see that they're saved out. And then from there, just do your reset. You can reset certain things individually. And then when it's done and reset, just reload your settings. Pretty much does the same thing. Also, please, can we get a full QWERTY keyboard option when adding Wi-Fi and more? I'm a millennial. We have typed on smaller. Oh, I can't get my fingers to hit it. Yeah, full QWERTY keyboard would be very interesting because those buttons would be even smaller than what we have. T9 all the way, man. Old school flip phone user here. DBDS. I use Series Saturn lenses. I use them both to film music videos and for locations shoot when scouting. Very good to know. Coming close to a year with the S9, but my sensor doesn't have any dust. Would you recommend sending it in as part of Pro Services? Do they check other functions as well? I mean, if you're in the platinum tier level, so like if you're paying for the LUMIX Pro service, it never hurts. They do a full clean and check on the camera. They'll make sure firmware is updated. They'll make sure that everything's just kind of like working and running and everything's good. They do sensor cleaning. They check calibration of all that kind of stuff. They make sure that all the buttons and dials and everything looks great. So it's a really good service to use if you're in that platform, because you are also entitled to it, I think, twice a year to send them in. If you're not on that program, it can be beneficial to send it in. I would say, unless you're noticing any kind of problems with it or funkiness with the camera, send it in and have it checked out if you are experiencing those things. If not, you're probably good to go. Our cameras are fairly bulletproof in that sense, so Dust is probably the one thing that, like, no matter what camera, you're never going to get around it because you've got an exposed sensor cover glass. Even if you have a closing shutter mechanism, you still have the ability for dust to get around. The sensor cover things are designed really more to stop larger dust particles from getting in, so. Where did we go? Color clip-in filters. If you place a Kalari clip-in filter in front of the lens, does it make any difference? So, for those that don't know, this will be the last thing I can talk about on this stream before I got to jump over to Discord. For those that don't know, where's my S1R2? Here it is. Kalari released clip-in filters. So here is my S1R Mark II. You'll see I have this little plate in here that basically gives me magnetic mounting points for a filter. And what that filter looks like, this isn't really the one I'd use in this camera. This is one for my infrared camera. It looks like this. Let's see if we can do this. You can see it. Looks like this. This is an 850 nanometer infrared filter. This literally, if I want to put it in the camera, I just take it, do that, and it magnetically clips in. So now it's in place. You're not touching the sensor. You're not getting anywhere close to the sensor. I do it with the camera off, so the shutter close thing is on. And if I want to remove it, they give you like one of those little pick things. And I can just take it out, grab it by the sides. And then they give you a really nice kind of case to carry them in. I love these things, especially for my infrared camera, because I hate screwing on filters, taking them off. It makes things super easy. And then now they've added the optical low pass filter one as well. So I have a few suggestions about the focus stacking. Which channel would you be using on Discord? So we have an event set up on Discord. If you go over onto the Discord, you'll see that it's there's an event that's going to happen a little over 15 minutes from now. You can ask them there. You can also drop those comments like that under the suggestions channel. Wait, that's an infrared filter. Yes. I have that one as an infrared, and then on my IR converted S1R, this is an original S1R. Here I have a chrome, which one is this called? An iridium filter in here, which gets like color enhancing. And you can see like I got a couple little dust specks on there, but that's where, just grab one of these things. One of these things works great. Just, I'm good to go. And actually, for those that were looking, I was doing anamorphic infrared with this setup. So, I wonder if they have like a Pro Mist style filter. They do. They have mist filters over on their site. They've got a bunch of them. Let me see if I can pull up the link for it. See, stuff like this I have no problem talking about because it's non-invasive. It doesn't do anything. Like, you're not modifying your camera or anything. Yeah, here you go. Kalari filters. There you go. So that's a link to the filters. They got a bunch of different options. They have internal NDs, 3-stop, 10-stop, 6-stop, IR chrome, mist diffusion, quarter and eighth. They have a dust protective one, a bunch of infrared ones, UV IR, alpha H or H alpha, and then they should be the optical low pass filter is another option. that they've got as well. It's pretty cool, Sean. You should do unique camera mod event. Unique camera as in the store? Or a unique camera modding event? Need one for MFT. Yeah, check their page out. They have stuff for Micro Four Thirds as well. Ordered the clip-in OLPF. Looking forward to trying out. Yeah, should be pretty cool. For those of you that optical low-pass filters are a real important thing, I think this is a cool way to work with it because, like LUMIX mods, gotcha. Yeah, we could do that because there's a lot of ways that people have designed or set their cameras up. But yeah, as far as like the filters go, like I know there's a number of users that are like, yeah, I'd really love to have, an optical low pass filter for your style of work. The fact is, like, there's a lot of cases where having the sharper, cleaner image out of the gate is very beneficial, but then some of those times that sometimes you want that low pass filter or that little bit softer of an image, whether it's for moire or you just want a little bit of a softer image, can be a benefit. So now an option like this is a pretty slick way to kind of handle that for everybody. So with that, like I said, it is 2 o'clock, so I do have to wrap up here so I can get everything set up for Discord. So if you aren't already, go take a look. Join us over on Discord. The link is down in the description to join over on Discord. Let me actually double check and make sure that it is. Should be down there. Let's go into here. Just mute myself so I'm not feeding back. Yeah, so the link is down in the description for Discord. It's right underneath the lighting support. So again, we use the Zhiyun. This is actually the Mackie edition of the S1II series, and then I've got some M20Cs. But yeah, right underneath that is the Discord link. Go take a look. Join us over there. We'll be kicking that meeting off, or that session off, at about 2:15 my time, Central Time. So yeah, join us over there. Otherwise, thanks everybody for the questions, the comments, the chat, the feedback, answering those polls. That was definitely helps. You kind of understand how you all use the equipment and work with it. Yeah. Those of you that are going to join over on Discord, I'll see you in about 10 minutes at this point. And yeah, have a great day, great rest of your weekend. Get out there, create some cool stuff. Like the video if you like these conversations and these chats. Subscribe if you don't already. I know a lot of you subscribe already. Share it to people that you think may be interested in this kind of conversation and community. And yeah, we'll be back next Thursday, 2 p.m. right here on YouTube. Later.